Good morning, Bill. We're set to go.
Okay, it's now 8:30, and I will call the meeting to order. And we'll start with the introduction of the new board member, Eric Mitchell. Eric, why don't we go around the room first, tell you a little bit about ourselves, each of us, and then you can tell us your background and how you happen to volunteer for this, and we'll go from there. Okay. I'm Bill Hayes. I am the acting chairman of the board, following the passing of Stan Svensson. I've been on the board for just about 2 years. I started in January 2 years ago. I'm retired. I've been retired about 10 years from General Electric. I spent 23 years in manufacturing management there, and then 20 years in engineering process and project management. For community service, I volunteered on the board of the Homeless Shelter in Lynn for 13 years. I spent 4 years as vice president, 3 years as president. And this is my current community service. Okay, Mike?
So I've been on the board now, I think probably 6 months, 7 months, somewhere in that range. Maybe even a little longer, a little more. Yeah. It runs fast, is what it comes down to.
When you're having fun.
That's right. I've done, I've been involved in town government since I was, as Mark reminds me, a little kid. So this is the latest sort of board that I'm on. I'm also on the finance committee as well. So I do have a little bit of an overlap between the two. I was a selectman at one point. As I said to Mark today, what's remarkable in the town of Danvers, I'm going to make sure this gets on the video because hopefully this will change.
Speak up.
Is that if you were to take everybody who is or has been a selectman in Danvers who's still alive, you put us all into one room, which wouldn't need much more of a room than this, I am still the youngest person in that group. Wow. And I was elected 23 years ago. So we have a very old demographic that is current or former selectmen in town, and hopefully that will change with the current election. But welcome to the board. It's actually a good group of people, and we're very fortunate that we have a fantastic group of professional staff that we depend on entirely for this. So.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Steph?
I'm Stephanie Doherty. I've been with the town for almost 8 years. I administrative work. I work with Clint Allen, the assistant utility director, and I also work with Mark Piccarini, who's the director of engineering and operations. And I support the entire engineering department, and anyone who needs my help, I help.
Good, thank you. Clint?
Good morning. As Stephanie gave me a nice introduction, I'm Clint Allen. I've been with the division for about 9 years. I started out as the efficiency engineer for a few years, moved up into engineering and operations, and most recently, about a year ago, I took on this position. But yeah, as Mike said, it's a great working group, and welcome to the team.
Peter Kapusik, Department of Public Works Business Manager. I work on both sides of the street, the tax recorded side and the utility side of the street. And Stephanie sells herself short. She's a big help to me also. So, and anyway, I'm working on the financial stuff with Clint, Dave, and the rest of the DPW team.
Okay.
So we left out, so Clint coming from Colorado was our first Skype hire of the envelope. And Pete left out the fact that he started with the town running the motor grader for the DPW division and then got his accounting degree at Bentley while he worked for us.
He was not a Skype hire.
He was not a Skype hire. Well said,
I'm not sure there was even television.
Oh, that was a blow.
You'll likely not see me make sure I say a number without looking over to check with Pete if I've got the number right.
Yeah.
But and I started back with the town in '01 as on the DPW side as director of operations, moved up as director in the DPW side, and then added on directing the electric utility also. So
Okay, thank you, Dave.
that's our team.
And we have another regular at the board meetings. Mark, you want to introduce yourself?
I think you'll find me very productive at these meetings because I'm the only representative from the residents right now. And my name is Mark Zuberek, and I'm a former town meeting member, finance committee member, selectman, now I'm televising these meetings, and I work on a news program for the town, and that's my volunteer work for years. And I hope to bring the residential and commercial issues back to the board, because I really would like to make sure that the residents are taken care of in this company. This is a well-run company, but it needs influence from the outside looking in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I'd like to, oh, I'm sorry, and then Eric, now that you kind of got a feel for who we are.
I thought you were doing fine.
Yeah. I almost forgot you.
Yes, yeah.
Now that you've had a chance to see who we are and how we got here, please tell us about yourself.
Sure, so I am about 4, going on 5 years as a Danvers resident. I spent most of my career, I'm from New Jersey, most of my career, and lived in Boston, and we moved to Danvers about 4 years ago. Been on the Cultural Council. I've just served 2 years, going into my 3rd year on the Cultural Council. We have an event coming up. If I had the date, I would plug it right now. I missed that. I'm gonna get in trouble. My background, I work for a nonprofit. I've been in nonprofits my entire career, and so I have, I'm a Vice President, Chief Operations Officer, so I deal with all things operations, and including facilities and lights and energy, and so this has some
sounds like a great background.
I expect to learn a lot, as well as to, it makes sense for what I currently do to kind of pay attention to these things. And you know, as I pay an electric bill, and I'm very much interested in, I've always been interested in how Danvers has, not on the national grid, and you know, all of that has fascinated me, because I'm used to paying the large conglomerate, so.
Yeah.
And so I have been working with the town manager to try and find the right fit. I've served on boards for over 20 years of various types in the Boston area, and I serve as chair of the board of a nonprofit down there now. And so, you know, once I'm based here, just trying to find something to get involved in. So
that's great.
It's going well.
Yeah. Sounds like you got a great background to join this board.
That's what I'm told. You know, we've been really, you know, really trying to have a good conversation about the right fit for, you know, my other obligations, as well as, you know, my background. So I look forward to it.
The 8:30 in the morning fit too. We had to make sure the time slot.
Yeah,
that's right.
Did you see my email?
Yeah, I did. I didn't see. So I missed it last night, but I saw it early this morning. So yeah.
Okay, I think following that, before we take public comments, we need to address that now that we have a full board, we need to address the selection of a chairman of the board. So I'll open the floor to nominations for chairman.
I nominate Bill to be chair.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Do we have any other nominations? Hearing none. All those are in favor of the motion to have Bill as the chairman?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Should we take the acting off of your name?
Take the acting off. Okay. The reign of terror shall begin.
Yes, or as we should say, stop acting.
Yes.
Yeah, that was good.
He is going to be a good addition to this board. Okay, the meeting is now open for public comments. Mark?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time you're devoting to letting the public speak. One thing that I like to bring back to the board is that I was very disappointed in last meeting's increase in the PPFA. For one thing, that's a 21% increase in the cost to the residents. And as a matter of fact, I received
Excuse me, Mark. I'd like to correct that number if I may. It is not a 21% increase in cost to the residents. The residents pay about 15 cents a kilowatt hour, if I'm correct, Clint. So it's a 1 cent increase, which puts it around 6 or 7%.
And what I was getting to, Bill, is that it's the increase in the PPFA.
Yes.
PPFA is 21% increase from what it was prior to this, because I just received my bill last week, and I went through the numbers, and 50% of it was at the old rate, and the new rate is already in place. The thing is that we have so much cash available
Thank you so much. I
and
appreciate it.
cash that we have spent in the past that was due to the collection of revenue from the residents. Why are we increasing the rate? I still don't understand that, and I would like to get an explanation to that later, but we'll get to that PFA rate when the time comes.
Yes.
The one thing that I don't understand from the board is that you're increasing, or you're allowing the town manager to increase the rate, even though the DPU is investigating the spending of the past 4 years. And that has not come to a conclusion.
Which actually, that reminds me, can we, thanks Mark, now that we have the third meeting, can we schedule a executive session before the next meeting?
Yeah, for, what topic was that for?
I think we,
Pending
any pending litigation.
Okay.
Sorry, Mark.
Well, I'm glad you interrupted my train of thought, that's what you wanted to do, but that's okay.
Please continue.
Thank you.
Briefly.
Briefly, the thing is that investigation is still ongoing, and it has not been fully replied to by the town. And what I like to do is just ask the question, why are we increasing the rates even though we have these two issues that are ongoing? And that's from the resident standpoint. And that's what I'm here for.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Dave, I'll ask you, do we wish to address that question at some point during this meeting?
Well, I'll give a
We'll get
couple
the
quick
PPA.
responses. We've answered the question. We thoroughly talked about the question of using retained earnings instead of doing the rate increase. We debated that last meeting and the meeting before it.
Right.
The big part of that debate was the fact that we have just made a large contribution to our retirement liability, and that was, I believe, one of the determining factors in saying, let's not use any more reserves. That was over $4 million we just transferred to work on getting the rate down right out of our earnings. So that was one of the major factors to hold off. And it also triggered us to continue working on our cash policies and our cost of service study. And that is in progress right now, and we really want to make sure and see just how much cash we should keep in the bank based on industry standards. How many days of cash should we keep there?
So that's a pending question?
Yes. So that's.
So I don't have to ask it now?
You don't have to ask, but that's, yeah, it's an ongoing study we're doing right now. We have numbers from 180 days of cash to 300 days of cash to, we're going to work to set a policy on that. How much the cash, and then how much to keep put away. When we look at the percentage increase of what it was when we put that penny up, our new chairman is absolutely right. When you take 1 cent over our 15 cent is in the 6 or 7 range. If you look at what was the increase in the whole PP&FA, you need to add in both the embedded piece and the non-embedded piece to get the true increase to the PP&FA, which then comes around, it was right around, I believe it's around 12% clip, like we talked last month. The 20% is, that Mr. Zuber calculated, was the percentage increase of the non-embedded PP&FA. But PP&FA, it has 2 different components about it, which you'll learn about in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. I would like to add one clarifying comment. In addition, Dave, we discussed also the fact that the reserves we have came about over a long period of time due to some one-of type of events. And what the reason for making the change, as you clearly stated, included several factors which are ongoing. That these are systemic changes to our business, and to use one-time reserves to address a systemic change is not a sound business decision. if we had a temporary thing that we needed time to react to, such as if we had another oil embargo or something like that, which was unanticipated, hopefully temporary, that would be the kind of thing that we could consider using reserves for. And we are coming up with a reserve policy that will clarify those type of situations. So in addition to the business things which were thoroughly discussed at the last meeting, and the question of using the reserves was thoroughly discussed at the last meeting, the board made the decision to improve the rate increase requested by the management fee. That's where we are. So we will consider that the answer to your question, Mark.
Could I just respond to what?
Yes, briefly.
Briefly is right. The question is, the one thing that the board has totally, well, not ignored, but reserved their rights to consider later is the residents. The residential rate, commercial rate, and industrial rate is going up whether we like it or not. That has been done.
Yes.
The one thing is that the residential rate has not been adjusted. And the thing is that maybe that should be a consideration in the future, that the residential rate should be reduced because of the consumption. I mean, we're not consuming as much electricity as we had in the past. And we're not paying as much as we paid in the past. So the costs are going down. But the one thing that the residents see is increases in their costs.
Okay.
So it's inflation.
All right. That's not accurate, Mark, but I'm not going to get into a debate with you. All right. Minutes from the last meeting. The agenda item is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. I have two changes I would like to request, Steph, and I've given those to you in handwriting. But on page 2, under the DPU rate filing, the second bullet on the second line, Clint stated that it is a decrease in the tariff going from fixed fuel costs moving to PP and FA. I think I'm requesting that we change decrease to a portion of the tariff going from fixed fuel costs moving to PPFA. I believe that's clearer, and I think that Clint did explain
Clint stated it is a portion of the tariff. Yeah, that makes sense.
Portion of the tariff.
It is a so we'll delete the word decrease. Clint stated it is a portion.
And in should go to of.
Of.
Yeah, I didn't mark that step. Okay, so that's one change I proposed. The second change I propose is on page 4, under the comments from board member Bill Hayes. The second bullet, Bill stated that we are not varying the rate as Mark implied. I would like to change implied to stated. My recollection is that was a clear statement. And then I would like to change it is being embedded. I would like to replace it is being embedded, which I did say, but I further cleared by saying PP and FA is being increased openly, including televised. And that's the writing that I've given to Steph.
So we'll add that on the end, Bill. PP and FA is being increased openly,
including televised. So it's.
Should we say included record?
And recorded.
And when we say recorded, Bill, we don't know if Mark's really going to put it on the TV. It's up to you.
I already did.
No, I know that, but we can't. We don't know if we're going to put it on there or not.
The true municipal access process that we have.
Yeah. And recorded.
Oh, so it's being included televised and recorded?
No, it is increased openly and recorded.
And recorded. Okay. Including televised or deleted?
I would say that.
Okay. Delete.
I would not include that piece.
You don't want to give me any credit at all, do you?
Well, I just do.
If it were live televised, would make sense.
If we said it, Mark would be criticizing us. How will you know I'm going to tell us that? You can't tell me. You can't tell me to do that. So flip it right around.
Okay.
You're right.
Or how it could be edited before.
Oh, exactly.
Put on TV.
Should we say and edited on there? No.
Does anyone else have any suggested changes?
I don't, and so accordingly, I make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I abstain.
You abstain, okay.
Nicely done. Wow. Without me yelling at you or anything. All right.
The motion is
You
passed.
can't vote, sorry.
Okay. All right, we are now ready for Peter to present the financials.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, what we have in front of us today is the draft or in-progress financial statements for 12/31/2019. Part of the, at the end of the year, there are certain adjustments and stuff we have to do to accrue certain expenses and revenues into these statements, and the utility accountant and the business division is working diligently to do that. Some of the things that need to be accrued, which are included in this, is unbilled revenue. Part of the revenue that we bill in January really was for electricity that we sold through the month of December. So that's been brought back into here, and that will have the effect of making the revenues go up. So we've done that, as we've stated before, but I will reiterate, there are certain power bills that we, even though we bought the power in through December 31st, 2019, we don't receive those power bills until several months into the next fiscal year, 2020, calendar year, excuse me. We're waiting still for the E&E Oak bill, which we've discussed in the past can be large. I believe we're anticipating about a $475,000 bill at this point in time. That would be a direct reduction of our profit at the bottom. There's some other smaller bills, New England Power, PTF, NIPA bills. Accrued absences is another thing we still have to go through and do, which will have probably the it will reduce our profit, it will increase our expenses. There are also two other expenses that we need to wait for, which is our OPEB and pension expense. This is the year that we have, every year we get a new report from our actuarials. Before the actuaries can in fact do that, we have to have the retirement system, which is an independent group separate from the town. It comes out of town hall. They have to close their books. The auditors have to come in and audit those books. PARAC has to get the final report from the retirement board, give their seal of approval to it. At that point, we can then forward all of our information to the actuaries. The actuaries will then evaluate all that using the mathematics of actuaries, and they will come up with what our funding schedule should be for the pension fund and what our liability is at this point in time. So that will take a bunch of time, and that will be getting that report maybe the end of June. Because it does take that long this year, one thing that is different is the Department of Public Utilities, which we have to file an annual report. They've extended the date that we have to file that to September, where before it used to be the end of March. So we're not the only ones. The DPU has taken that into consideration, and they've extended the date for everybody, because everybody now has to come up with the OPEB number and the pension number. And as we've seen in the past, those numbers can be large and may have a material difference on our statements.
So just quick, before Pete goes further, we're a calendar year budget, completely separate from the town. This is a separate set of audited financials. We do a town audit, then we do a Danvers electric audit. So we have to run it like as a profit and loss. We have to run it under DPU regulations. That's what we have to do it that way. When town meeting approves the budget in May, they're actually approving a budget that we've already spent on since January. There's language in Chapter 164 to allow that. It's how it has to be.
We have 3 calendar years, 3 fiscal years at work.
So you get the drill.
Federal, we got state, and we have agency.
It drives the town manager crazy, right? Why can't? And there are transfers back and forth from us to the town to pay for services we receive from the town, and vice versa. If if we give the town services, we have transfers that way. The town itself is actually one of our largest customers. So if I switch my hat to the DPW side, we pay electric bills to Danvers Electric for all of the town buildings, schools, and streetlights. We make payments to Danvers Electric for all that from the town side. So, and is that? I just want to give them that quick overview before you get into how we're doing.
Hoping to touch on a lot of that myself.
Oh, you were? Okay, fire away then.
That's fine. So again, these are draft or in progress at this point in time. This will change. This isn't the finalized one, and as our other board members are aware, Eric, when we get the audited financial statements, the finalized one, we will have the auditors come in and they will present the final audited financial statements to the board, and they will be able to answer any questions, as they are a third party who takes a look at our books.
Have they issued any opinions in the last audited financials?
Yes, we have those. I could give you a copy of those if you'd actually like. And we got the, no findings, everything's, they were, I thought they were very happy. I mean, you can ask the other board members and they can comment.
That'd be good for him to read. We have those right here in this office.
Yeah, if I can make a suggestion, Peter, when I joined the board 2 years ago, Peter gave me like 4 or 5 years worth of the last auditor's reports, which I found to be very helpful in that it gave me kind of a little bit of running history so that I could pick up some institutional knowledge for the board and activity.
The other thing too, which they did for me, which I think Bill did this as well, which is really a great thing, is to have Mark set up a time with Mark, and Mark will bring you around to the facility. It's really tremendous.
Yeah.
We'll send you around, and between that and, I mean, again, anything that you feel the need for, they've got it, and it's always good to take a look at a lot of that stuff. So.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I was going to bring it up later, but we can do it now since we're on the topic. When I joined, I had a couple of meetings with Mark. We did a tour. We had at least one meeting where we were just in his office and he showed me around the building here, the SCADA system where they collect the data and all. Met the engineers. I met with Chuck Underhill, who had the job Clint has now, slightly different, somewhat different. But in that position, he buys all the power. And he's really the face toward our power suppliers, transmission suppliers and all. And Chuck was quite helpful in explaining how the market we're in works, from generation to transmission to us. And that was very helpful in understanding. Plus, as you'll see later, he does a lot of work with BPFA, and you'll see how we compare to other towns and the investor-owned utilities. So definitely recommend a meeting or two with Clint. And he's got some good literature in that office, I assume. That was helpful to me. There are different booklets on how the electrical industry operates, and I even gave Mike one, a library book, a couple of library books on how the electric industry runs and the history of the electric industry.
Unfortunately, it's not on Audible, so I've yet to read. We're getting there.
So, and I'd be happy to chat with you anytime if you're looking for suggestions or anything. Okay. All right. Peter, we'll let you continue now.
Okay. If we start on page 1 and we look at the revenues at the top part, and those revenues are from the sale of electricity, we can see that we're down approximately 6.25% from the prior year at this point in time. When I looked at our kilowatt hour sales, the kilowatt hour sales are down 4%. So out of that $2.5 million, $877,000 is down from not selling as much electricity. The demand is down $271,000, and the purchase power and fuel adjustment also is down $1.36 million. Now that's broken out into 2 pieces. That would in fact be a direct reduction because we sold electricity, but for Eric's benefit and as a reminder to the board, in 7/1/2019 we did in fact reduce the purchase power and fuel adjustment So we actually billed less money from July through December, you know, at a reduced rate to the customer. So that
January, right?
through January. That's
The new rate
correct.
was effective February 1st.
That's correct. So our sales are down. The revenue from the sales are down because of the reduction to the purchase power and fuel adjustment and a reduced number of kilowatt hour sales. If we go to the second part of our revenue section, which starts with jobbing and contract work, if we look at that first line, we can see that this year we've had $95,000 worth of jobbing and contract work, where last year we had $772,000. As we discussed at prior meetings, last year we had a lot of mutual aid where we sent crews to a couple places in Florida and one of the islands, I believe.
Yep.
And when we do that, we bill the community or the utility that we help out, and they pay us for it. Those are things that are out of our control. Last year was a good year. That brought up our revenue. Additionally, things that go in there would be if we had a development and we were billing a contractor to put in new infrastructure. Again, not under our control, and we can see how that can swing quite a bit because there's a difference of $677,000 here from one year to the next. So again, that's a big difference, but those things we don't have any control over. The other thing of note here is if we go down about halfway through there, it's called miscellaneous non-operating income, line 421. We can see that this year that's 1.6 million if we round it up. That's flush of funds. That's money that we had to have. The utility is a part owner of the Seabrook Power Plant. As a member of MWIC, which we worked through on our piece of that, there was bonds to finance the building of that. The last of the bonds were paid off. This is money that the utility had to have on hand at MWIC in case there was an emergency. The last bonds were paid off. We ended up getting $1.373 million returned to us. That's certainly a lot of money, and we called and we worked through them and asked how that would be, what could we anticipate for those revenues going forward? And they told us that is going to be zero next year and will be zero going forward. So in the past, we've had those one-time payments from MWIC that, you know, were cash payments to us, but those are in fact going away. So in total, if we go down to grand total revenue, we can see that our revenue for this year is down a little less than 5%. If we look at the bottom, now we're gonna, if we take into account our purchase power, which is the biggest portion of our expenses, if we start with account 555 and go to 570, at this point our purchase power is down $1.82 million. That's not going to be as much as I mentioned earlier. We've got, you know, 500,000 between E&E and NIPER and PTF. So really it's going to only go down about $1.3 million, our power. So yes, our power did go down. In reaction to that, we reduced our purchase power fuel adjustment, but our revenues have gone down more than the reduction in our power cost. On the next page, which is more of our expenses, if we skip down to line 926, there is a big difference between 2018 and 2019. That has to do with journal entries that we made in 2018 when we were required by GASB to bring on the full expense of the OPEB. OPEB is other post-employment benefits, which translates to English to the health insurance for the retirees.
And what's GASB?
GASB is the Government Accounting Standards Board, which sets the accounting standards for municipalities. And that comes under, I think it's financial accounting foundation. But they're the ones that set GAAP, which is the rules of the road that we have to follow in these books, which the auditors then give an opinion on how we follow GAAP.
Being the final in both businesses, we have our own set of acronyms. And as much as we can, let's try to explain them as we use them so that Eric can have some idea what we're talking about.
I agree. And the accounting side may have theirs, but the engineers got more than. But
We should
anyway,
we just
that's
give you a seatbelt for your first meeting.
I'm treading water right now, I'm doing okay. Doing okay, but Google works well.
Yeah, okay.
So that was one of the bigger swings in our expenses where we didn't, what we had to make that big adjustment last year was the business was taking money and setting it aside in an MMDT account in preparation to have money set aside for the cost of retirees' health insurance. We, at the town meeting, took a vote and they voted to create a trust fund, which means that money can then only be used for retirees' health insurance. We put that money in there, and because we took it from essentially on the books of the electric and put it into the trust fund, that reduced our expenses and created why we have such a big swing. So as we can see at this point in time, we're looking at a profit of $2.1 million, which is profit and loss, the bottom. You know, that's a bit different from last year, but again, with our revenues going down and our expenses, you know, well, if we look at our revenues going down because of sales and the purchase power and fuel adjustment, that's gone down $2.5 million, which pretty much corresponds to what the difference in our profit. Our profit has gone down that much too. So that's the highlights on what I can see as the big swings in our expenses and our revenues. We still have, you know, we're more on pace for the $1 million plus that we usually budget for when we set our budget this year than other years.
Monday we'll have you in action.
Okay, explain it again, Peter.
Well, last year, if we look, we see 4.3 million.
Right.
The difference is the 2.2. I guess if I see why we're down $2 million, we took in $2.5 million less in revenue.
Right.
So where our expenses have been consistent, that money, if we had sold as much electricity and left our purchase power and fuel adjustment higher from July, we would have had $2.5 million more. Our expenses would have gone up, certainly because we would have had to buy more purchase power, but that would have tended to drop more to the bottom line.
Yeah. And just one easy way I think of it, Eric, is if you look at our revenue, we're about 95% of the prior year. And if you look at our costs, they're a little over 100% of the prior year. So that, of course, is reflected in the decrease.
My question, I think, from a budget to actual standpoint, you said it was off about $1 million from what?
What we tend to do when we budget is to budget for $1 million plus, you know, what we anticipate making. We don't budget for a high number or a high profit. And so this year we're a lot closer to that than we have been in the past, where we had the adjustments due to GASB, where we brought on the OPEB money, which had the effect of reducing our expenses.
And another big swing we've had in prior years was $1 million last year, was that so-called flush of funds from M-Wave, from the Seabrook plant. I think the prior year was like over $3 million, right?
Yes, that was another series of bonds that were paid off at that point in time. But again, so at that point, we had that money in escrow and they sent it back to us.
The key is that's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those days are gone. We will not get any more flush of funds from that operation, so we can't budget for it or expect it. You know.
Right. That was one of the factors that led to the rate increase.
Mm-hmm.
Go back 2 years, so what would the profit loss, whatever the profit loss statements have said the prior 2 years? Is there a trend there?
This year's high, I'd have to look at 17 off the top of my head. I don't.
So, and the reason that I asked, the snapshot that I'm trying to take is if $1 million, $2 million, $4 million profit is normal. I'm just trying to get a norm in my mind for the numbers that you're discussing.
We shoot for the million, sometimes it's been higher. Like I
Sometimes
said,
lower.
if we go back to, this year we got more in flusher funds than we anticipated. Last year we had the one-time thing from OPEB. We had the mutual aid things, which added $600-something thousand to our revenue stream. So we shoot for the millions, $1.5 million, but there are things that happen in this industry that can change quickly and rapidly and end up being a substantial amount of dollars.
So when you get those reports, you'll see where it was. I think it was the last, we had a couple of years where it was right around $2 million up to the good. Before that, we were slightly negative. We can finish in the negative, however, it decreases our cash position. And we had that about 8 years ago. We had a number of years with big projects going on. And we kept minus, and then we really had to work to get back to the positive side.
Right.
Yes, on the cash, yes.
On the cash side.
That was the Recovery Act. That's not great.
Great, thank you.
And where's the depreciation expense on here, Peter?
Front page.
Front page?
Correct, right? Dave's absolutely right. Right there, the top line in expenses, 403.
Yep. Unlike most businesses, depreciation in this business is a cash expense. So that's real money that goes out. It's not an accounting allocation.
Earmarked.
Correct. Bill's absolutely right. In addition to doing that, we take money from our operating cash account and we transfer it dollar for dollar to our depreciation cash fund. That fund is used to pay for the capital projects of the division in that year and future years.
So we're mandated by DPU to put a minimal level of money in the depreciation account. They changed that in order to make sure we were keeping the utility infrastructure up to speed. We vary it, it's a percentage of income. We vary it between 3% and 5%. Each year we make a decision based on the capital plan of that year. Right now we're running at 3% depreciation.
Is that enough?
Right now it is.
But 3 to 5%, as Dave mentioned, that's not our range. That's the regulatory board, the DPUs. We're required to keep it. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
We have a couple big projects going, and those are the substation replacements. When we get to a substation replacement, those can't be funded at the 3% level. At that time, we'll need to look at either increasing it 3 to 0.5 or more percent, or look at borrowing the funds for that. And then if we borrow the funds for it, then we pay the debt back. We have very little debt for an organization of our size.
Okay.
And the debt we have, Dave, is on the board is for substations.
For substations, our local debt.
Yeah,
Yep.
over here, there's one up on Route 1 that we built.
Yep, one down by the high school.
If we go to page 4, now we're on to our balance sheet. For Mr. Mitchell's benefit, the top part of this, where it says assets, from 341 to 399, this
Account
is
numbers.
that's the net value of our infrastructure, or our capital projects. That that's what that part is, and that's what we depreciate every year between 3 and 5. And as Dave mentioned, we're doing 3% this particular year, and have done 3% for the last several years. So when we build a new distribution line or redo a substation or whatever it might be, this it goes into this part of the balance sheet, and it becomes expensed, where Mr. Hayes showed us on depreciation expense, and we recover those costs and profit that we're going to make on that over between 20 and 33 years, depending upon whether it's the 3% or the 5%. At the bottom of the page, what tends to be of interest sometimes is our other special fund stabilization. That is our reserve funds, and that's account 128. and the account right below it, which is account 131, which is cash. That particular cash account is the cash that we use for our day-to-day operations. That funds payroll, you know, the phone bills, all that type of infrastructure. And if we can see that from this year to last year, our operational cash is down $400,000 approximately. So from year to year, we can see that this business isn't throwing off a ton of cash from operations. As Mr. Hayes has mentioned, that we do have the other fund stabilization that has been accumulated, I should say, over a long period of time. You know, monies that we've gotten back from flush of funds and set aside. So between these two accounts right here, this year we have $16.8 million versus last year we had 20.7. One of the larger things that makes up that difference is that we sent $4.4 million to the retirement board to pay off our, if we went to the actuarial report for the funding schedule for the division, we had a unfunded actuarially accrued liability that we paid off, and that's why where most of the money went. And then we received flush of funds, a payment of 1.33 this year. So there is some movement in that stabilization account, and that's what we did with the money. But again, the cash from operations, as you can see, is a little bit less than it was. If we go to the next page, page 5, while we're on cash, in the middle of the page, we'll see depreciation fund, and as we hit on a little bit earlier, that's when we have the depreciation expense, there's an additional, you know, the operational cash will go down, the depreciation cash will go up by that amount, and that's where it shows. So if we take all three of those cash accounts, the stabilization, the operational cash, and the depreciation cash, at this point we have $19.6 million versus last year we had $22.2 million. And the big swings there were, like I mentioned earlier, the payment to the pension fund, the receipt of funds from Emwick for the flush of funds, and then, you know, we do have the stabilization account money in MMDT accounts with the town treasurer's office, and naturally we receive interest on a monthly basis from those. And the interest payments, as the treasurer said to me, those payments go up quicker and follow what the actual interest rates are in the real world, as opposed to if we had a municipal bank account. Having said,
MMDT is what?
Mass Municipal Depository Trust.
Okay.
So having said that in 19, as we may recall, the Federal Reserve, which controls the interest rates in this country, in 18 they raised the rates. So that increase in rates by the Federal Reserve would have translated into increase in interest payments to the electric division through the Mass Municipal Depository Trust accounts. The interest income is up higher in 2019. However, in 2019, the Federal Reserve has lowered the interest rates 3 times. So going forward in 2020, we would anticipate, and be reasonable expecting it, we're going to have less interest income in 2020.
But we all refinanced our mortgages. Our home mortgages.
So,
was the result of that.
Yeah. So that's our position on the cash. The other thing that is of interest to me, and could be of interest to the board, is up at the top of page 5, the second account down, customer accounts receivable. We're a little over $500,000 less this year at this point in time than we were last year. Some of that is in fact due to the fact that we're charging less. From July 1st through December, we charged our customers less for the electricity we provided. But in addition to that, we have an ongoing collections program, and they're constantly working on that, and they've done a good job to
Good
help
job on that, Pete.
also to keep that down, keep that number down. So at this point in the draft financials, where we are with the things that we have accrued and what we're anticipating going forward, we are profitable for 2019. We're liquid and it looks like we're in good shape to go into 2020.
Okay. Can I say what on the receivables? We are under our regulations. We do customer shut-offs in the spring, summer, and fall for unpaid bills. There's a period we're not allowed to do that in the winter months.
There's special circumstances where we can, and in a rare occasion, we have gone and jumped through the extra hurdles necessary to do that, but
In the winter?
In the winter, and the person actually paid us before we got there, because we try to connect the customer who's having difficulty in the DPU to work it out. We certainly never want to do that, even in the summertime when we're allowed to. We always try to, if you don't believe us, go. Let them explain it to you. They're here to protect you from us if you feel you need to be protected from us, and we find that works best.
Fortunately, we do have to do shut-offs in the summer.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, we'll now go to the PPFA. Clint?
Okay.
And again, Clint will do a nice job explaining this, and you'll see how we compare to others.
Sure. Yep. So, as usual, Peter's giving me a nice introduction, segue into a lot of things that I need to talk about.
No extra cost.
Yeah, thanks, Pete.
You're welcome.
Just get opening. So, I typically like to start with just kind of going to page 2. It's just a good, it's a visual representation. I'll fill in the narrative so you guys can kind of look at it.
You're free to make that page 1 if you'd like next month.
We could do, yeah, sure. We can switch it up. So if we take a look at the January-December 2019 power supply costs and revenues, as Peter had stated, we effectively, from the power supply perspective, we closed out 2019 with the exception of the open access transmission tariff, which typically we'll see that invoice coming around March. That one's always about 2 to 3 months after the actual month that it was accrued. So with that stated, it looks like for, at the end of 2019, we closed out about 3% lower in actual kilowatt hour sales from what we had projected for 2019. And the result of that was that power supply revenue came in approximately 4.6% below where we had anticipated, which at this point is looking to be right around $1.2 million. But also, as Peter had stated, our power supply costs that had come in lower than we had budgeted for 2019. December itself closed out about 3.6% below where we had anticipated. We received the November open access transmission tariff bill, or the OAT as we can refer to it, and we are looking at our total power costs are approximately 6.5% below what we had budgeted for. So that at this point looks about 1.6 million. We're looking at if the OAT comes in around the 475. We are anticipating closing out 2019 to our power supply over under budget of approximately 1.2 million.
Okay, so let's stop there a minute if you may. So what all that translates to is, on the graph you see both projected and actual, what we think we're going to get for revenue and what we think we're going to pay for power, and then the lower graph with the diamonds, triangles, is what's the difference between the two. And that's what Clint refers to as under and over account. And we usually try to get that somewhere near $500,000, is that right?
Correct, yeah, and that's actually, so we have formalized a PPFA, purchase power fuel adjustment policy, and that's stated within that we try to get that $500,000 at the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, so this year, as you can see, even though we lowered our rate we charged, we still wound up at $1 million, almost $250,000 more revenue than we paid in power costs. Okay, so we exceeded our target. Now, one of the important things is we are required by the Chapter 164 to return that to the customers. That's in effect an overcharge. It's over and under, and so in effect it's an overcharge. But we're required by the state laws to return that to the customers. So every year, that is returned to the customers. Whatever we wind up with there is returned to customers. And then you'll see it projected here. The starting point looks like it's that 1.2 number, right?
Correct, yeah, so we'll be starting 2020 with around 1.12.
Yep. And you can see we're projecting that going down to 843, so almost $500,000 and $400,000 down over the next year.
Define return to customers.
Lower the rates,
Okay.
or charge rates that in effect return that to the customers.
So
Considering our total costs.
when we start in January, we do a budget for the year on what we're going to pay for power and what is going to come in, and forecasting how much we're going to sell. We start the account with plus whatever the carryover was for the last year. So if this was, what's this?
1.2.
What's that, 1.2 million?
1.2.
So we start at $1.2 million in the bank, and then use that, and then that balance goes up and down through the year depending on power costs. And right now we're projected at the end of December 2020 to end up with $843 in the bank. So we'll essentially be projected to give back approximately $300,000 of that, or $400,000 to the customers. Does that make sense?
So, and with that, we basically, as we were just speaking about, we have spoken about this morning, we, you know, factoring in that there was an increase in power supply costs for the budget 2020 of about $800,000. Operational costs are going up. Our payment of taxes to the town is going up. Our retirement payments are going up. We did raise, we shifted out the embedded portion within the base rate for all the different rate classes, put that into the adjustable floating power supply PPNFA charge per month. And that increase was approximately 1 cent. That occurred February 1st, as Bill had mentioned. So the recommendation for March, with everything tracking through according to what we projected for 2020 and how 2019 looks like it's closing out, the recommendation is to hold the PPNFA charge stable through the month of March. And that would be for the residential class, approximately 5.7 cents, and for all others, 5.922 cents. Then to just sort of, so if you go to the last page of the packet,
Don't forget the last page.
this will be, yeah, so this will be the average, so the average R1 residential bill for 750 kWh would come in around $106 for the month, and this is kind of just where Danvers stacks up compared to some of the other municipal electrics. And in addition to, Eric, you kind of touched on, you lived in Boston, so you felt the squeeze of the IOUs. They would be there at the top where they pretty much always are.
IOU being industrial.
Oh, see, and I was doing something the whole time, doing all the acronyms. Investor-owned utility.
He might have known that one.
Yeah, you might have known.
Let's give him some credit
slip
there.
one out. So, and I thought it might be good, just for Eric, so this was a graph that I'd included last month. Do you guys want a copy of this? With the historic PPNFA chart?
Yes, please.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised it's not in here.
Yeah, I mean, I gave it as a background to where we had, yeah, got plenty for everybody, here we go. I had included it last month when we, Steph, you're all set. When we had discussed, the increase from, we maintained, if you want to look back to like July 2017, the rate was basically set and held for almost a year and a half. Then we had done the analysis last year that we in fact could and should lower the rate, as Bill had just mentioned, in order to pass through the over collection of power supply revenues back to the customers. And then as that held for 7 months through January 2020, we went through the analysis, we looked at the operational budget and everything I mentioned earlier, and determined where the PPNFA charge would need to land in order to recover our costs for 2020. And just as a note of, historically, this goes back to as far back as I could find the data, back to April 2013. The PPNFA charges are below the 7-year historic average still. And in fact, if you look at some of the higher swings through 2014 through even up to 17, the overall the total rate is between 1% and 3% below where it has been historically, for 3 out of the last 7 years still. So while it was an increase, if you really put it in perspective of where we've been and where we're at, it is appropriate.
Working with the board, and since I became the director, we've really worked to try to stabilize it so it's the same throughout the year. As you look back in 13, we were changing the PPNFA every month, which meant your electric rate was changing every single month. We really wanted to get away from that as much as possible. And a big part of that, I got to commend Clint, is being able to do an accurate forecast. We can't keep it stable if we're not able to accurately look into the what do you call it, the crystal ball?
Crystal ball, sure.
And do it. And things change in the market, but yet for the past couple of years we've been able to keep it steady for multiple months, and that's our goal.
You can see even with where we are now, we're well below where we were before. And
The chart makes the current situation look very good.
Yeah, and I joined the board here, so in my time on the board, it's been that same stable number situation. But listening to the war stories from back in this time with Stan, who was the previous chairman who was here, and I'm sure Peter could tell us, customers probably weren't happy when that rate was changing every month.
That's correct. The customers, even if it's hot, customers like stability. They want to know what to budget, and that's what the message I hear from the customers that come in here. They want to know on a consistent basis what we're going to charge for our product.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it's been quite stable for, well, all the way back to 14. So some changes, obviously, mostly in the downward trend until, a couple of points here, and then last month, February.
Should we get Bill to knock on wood for us over there?
Oh, this all predated me. It's nothing to do with me.
We don't want to go back.
Yes, we don't want to go back. But we do want to understand where we are and what the history has been.
Yep. So
are you back to page 1 now?
yeah, no, I think, so the official recommendation is to hold steady through March. And we are finalizing the PPNFA policy now. I think we'll have that ready for next month.
Do we have
just need a
a
signature
draft to hand out today?
I handed it out last time.
Yeah, that draft was handed out last
Did Eric get one of those?
I can get it.
Can you make sure that happens?
Sure.
So the plan, you're going to present that for review
For
and
approval. Yep.
recommended approval next month.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I got that on my list of questions.
Did you have any? Oh, we might as well talk about that now.
Sure.
You want to do it now?
Yeah, I'd like to do it now. If we have questions
Well,
on
okay,
it.
before we do that,
Or after we.
yeah. As we are an advisory board, I assume you're aware of that. Okay, so we don't approve most things. We recommend approval. But within our charter as an advisory board, the one thing we do approve is the PPNFA on a monthly basis. So having now had Clint's presentation, are there any more questions for Clint? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the PPNFA recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Okay, now we can go to that discussion.
If that's what I meant. Thank you, Bill.
So here's actually, it's just a summary of all the current rates in Danvers. So that's the residential, all our commercial, industrial, and then the municipal rates as well. So that's all within there.
So just a quick question now. So this is one that we actually have to approve.
We have to approve that.
So today, because it's...
Nobody beyond us looked at that and approves it.
So because it was level, that's easy for me to approve.
Right.
If it were an increase, I would be hard pressed to approve that because I don't think I would understand and could defend that decision. So I say that in advance of next month, that anything that's not level or decreasing, I'd have to defend why I say go in another direction. So my knowledge FYI.
Yeah.
Get me up to speed, and give me a heads up, you know.
And we do try to give the board advanced knowledge if
Right.
something's gone awry.
Right.
There are big things. Seabrook plant could have a major shutdown. If they're shut down for months, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. The weather conditions have created crazy things.
Right.
So,
And I can make myself available, you know, because I definitely want to be both up to speed and accountable, you know, when I open my mouth.
that's awesome.
You can see it in the minutes here. This is last month's PPNFA when we approved the increase, after much discussion and debate. And it was much, that was probably, what, at least a half an hour, if not more. And all of the things that you had mentioned earlier were discussed. The end of the flush of funds from MWIC, an increased payment in lieu of taxes pilot to the town, reduced sales in kilowatt hours. Previously, we had lowered the rate, so we were getting reduced revenue from that. The discussion about whether or not should we be taking some of our rate stabilization money to prevent or at least forestall that. That was a very extensive discussion. And then at the end, with just Mike and I on the board, we made the motion that approved increasing the rate. So I think we were very comfortable with what you just expressed. At least I am. I assume you were.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to sort of understand it in some respects is that 5 is our purview, if you look at the minutes from the last meeting. 3 and 5 together, to some extent, to most extent, result in what's probably most important with everybody as a consumer, which is our DPU rate filing, which, although we discuss and we advise, and certainly the PPFA is a incredibly important part of what that rate filing is. It's not the entirety of it, if that makes sense. So we do look at that PPFA and we make that rate, that decision on a monthly basis. How often do we do the DPU rate filing though? Is that?
Anytime we change
Yeah,
it.
anytime we change it. So as long as we keep the PPFA as the same, and there's no other significant issues out there with it, that they don't have to file a new DPU rate filing. But you're absolutely right. If we get to the point, at some point in the future again, and I think we're going to discuss it a little bit now, but that policy is to try to keep that PPNF and outside of the possibility of something strange happening in the course of the fiscal year. The hope is that we can make that determination at the beginning of the fiscal year in January, sort of set that PPFA hopefully for that year-long period, and that we won't be in a position to have to change that, although we'll discuss it on a monthly basis and hope that there are no differences. Is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
spot on.
Thank you. Yeah, please stop us anytime you have a question.
One quick thing too, I think we need to make a motion to accept the financials.
Oh, right, we did that.
Yeah.
We missed, I'm sorry, I missed that. May
I did too, but.
Thank you.
Stephanie's
I
kicking
move
you
to
underneath the
accept
table.
Move to accept the financials.
Do we hear a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Thank you, Steph.
You're welcome.
We got a rookie as chairman here. You gotta keep us.
First day business.
First day on the job. Okay. All right. That completes the PPNFA and the financials, and we're now ready for the engineering report.
Actually, I had a couple other things I'd like to
Oh,
speak
okay.
about with the PPNFA.
Yes.
So, well, do we want to talk about the policy now, or do you want to talk about the policy?
Just take comments on the policies,
Okay.
or unless you want to talk about your other thing first.
We go over the policy quickly, and then
All right, so this is really going to be, this is the draft policy that Clint mentioned about the purchase pure power fuel adjustment, PPFA. And it's pretty generic, but basically it's telling us the process. Do you want to give him a couple minutes to read through that?
yeah, sure.
finding gold and it's clean it. So I have a feeling it's a real strong.
I'm getting a thorough education in my electric bill right now.
Oh, yeah.
That explains it.
And I think I heard you say you were going to ask us to approve this next month, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so if anyone has comments on it, you can send individual emails into us, and then we'll send a draft out for the next meeting of where we end up.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Okay.
but the high level again is, and Mike, you kind of spoke about it. It was really to avoid that, you know, back in 13, 14, where it was within a year it swung a cent up and 2 cents down and back. So, just to maintain that stability, we will continue to do the monthly assessments, tracking, you know, all the power supply costs in and out. I'll continue to do the monthly report, and the board will continue to do the approval of the charge. However, we'll be looking at ideally, you know, really not having to adjust it more than, you know, 6 months at a time, and hopefully we can carry through the whole year. You know, as David had said, we try to budget out for the entire year. It'd be nice just to hold it there, keep it stable and flat for the calendar year.
And that's really down here in the objective, where it's proposed 6 months will be presented for approval December and June municipal board meetings for effective dates of January and July. But that is, and it's a concern that we had, was this is an objective, it's not a requirement. So that if something unusual happens, as Clint mentioned, that if we need to make a change, we can. We're not hamstringing ourselves here, saying we've got a policy that says we can't change it. Okay, so we have the flexibility, but we have a clear goal of trying to keep it stable.
Is this to some extent, I know we're not voting on it, is this to some extent putting in written form something that we've been doing anyway?
Yes.
Right, formalize it, yep. And that was actually a recommendation from, we had an operational efficiency audit performed, I think it closed out last year, beginning of last year. We can get you a copy of that too.
It's another book you're going to want to read.
Yeah, that's like a 60-page.
We had them look at everything we do and say,
That
what are
was
we
one
doing
of
good, what can we improve on, and that kind of, and it was.
Formalize a policy.
Good. I like those.
Yeah, and they came up with a number of policies that they recommended we put in place, and the management team has been working on those, and you're going to see some.
And if it's on Audible, that helps too, right?
Yeah, we'll look at that.
That's the only way I'm going to look at it, probably.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, and then I just had one other thing I wanted to talk about regarding the power supply is a couple weeks ago we have executed the Palmer long-term PPA, the Palmer biomass plant.
Oh, okay.
So
explain to Eric.
So yeah, here's a memo that kind of a summary of the contract. This is something we've been pursuing. Do you guys want a copy?
I do.
This is a contract we've been pursuing for, it came about like second quarter 2019. It's basically, it's going to be after construction. It's a biomass combined cycle generating plant, which basically means they're going to burn waste wood instead of like natural gas or coal. Not really applicable up here. And the science behind it, just to jump into the interesting part, is that they've done studies that the wood itself deteriorating in the forest releases more methane and greenhouse gases and if they can efficiently burn it and recover, generate electricity from that. And that's all well and good,
So
but
it's actually green power.
It's considered a carbon neutral resource, correct? Yeah, and that will be. That's a whole other conversation for another day, but that'll be helpful in the future.
I see you getting excited.
Yeah, you'll see. There's a couple paragraphs in there.
And he's not even the most excited.
Well,
Yeah, we got another guy who's even more, right?
Yeah, wait, yeah. There'll be
Jeffrey over.
I might bring him on next time.
He's our
so
efficiency guy.
So, but even more exciting than that, really, is that this is a 20-year contract. It starts out, it's an energy, it's a capacity, and also there's a rec portion of the contract. But
Okay, explain RECs.
so the renewable energy credits.
And what are those?
So
what does that mean?
Essentially, what those are is they were an incentive, adopted by the states to basically get people to build, renewable generation from renewable resources. So for every megawatt hour of generation that you produce off of like a solar or a wind farm, or in this case a biomass, that is worth a dollar value. They're traded through a state, basically it's a quarterly auction. And in this case, the RECs are valued, so they're called Class 1s. Currently, they're going to be Connecticut Class 1s when we start the contract. We can still sell those, so there's a dollar value for every megawatt hour we generate. So that makes the contract even more lucrative. And they're also working on legislation to classify these as mass Class 1, which the price is just a little bit more. So it's not a big deal breaker, or not a big difference, I should say. And going forward, so for the next foreseeable future, we will be selling these back in and getting payment for those RECs because the municipal light plants currently don't have any regulation from the DPU or the state to have a portion of our power supply portfolio coming from renewable resources or carbon-free resources. However, that is likely to change. We've been looking at it I know Dave's been looking at it for probably 4 or 5 years, but it's really starting to come to a head. The MLPs will have, the municipal light plants will have some requirement. So this will at that point we can withhold the RECs for that benefit and apply those towards our requirement.
And until that happens, we actually get revenue by selling them to people who are required to have them, such as Eversource, National Grid. Right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely correct. So.
And that's what these.
So those are those two charts right there. And those are the actual closed auction prices. They do a 5-year auction cycle.
Selling those off.
So that's the REC portion. The energy portion it starts out, it's a flat $44.50 per megawatt hour for the first 5 years, which is in line, and Eric will get you up to more speed with the ISO market and how the wholesale market actually works. But basically, if we were to go to the market
back
right
in
now,
grad school, but okay.
Books.
yeah.
We got books over there.
So if we were to go to market right now, we needed to supply a megawatt hour of energy to the town and for our customers. We went to the wholesale market, we would be looking at an average price of around $50 a megawatt hour. So this comes in for the first 5 years, actually below that market average, which is it's a great position to be in. Not to mention, the green aspect of it, right? And then at years 6 through 15, as you can see, there is a CPI escalator of 2.5%, and then years 16 through 20 go back to being flat. So the overall lifetime of the contract is projected to land between, somewhere around $50 to maybe up to $52 per megawatt hour, which is still well within line with the LMP, the locational market price or the wholesale price. And if not, it would likely be below that. And then the last portion of this contract would be the capacity portion. So just as a high level, as a utility, we are, not only do we have to buy wholesale power, the kilowatt hours to sell to our retail customers, we also have to pay essentially the grid our fee for being connected for how much power we're going to take. So they look at our system peak for an entire year. This is where Bill's gonna help me out, I can already tell. So I'm all right. I'm doing all right. Hold on.
Yeah, you're doing great.
So they look at the demand. There's a lot of good analogies. I think water is used often, but so you look at the size of the pipe you need for how much water you're gonna need at the maximum demand for your system. So that's basically our capacity charge. They look at that one time a year, our annual capacity. Then they being the ISO, the Independent System Operator of New England, ISO New England. They look at that once a year, they see where do we hit, they add a 20% factor on top of that, and then they bill us flat for all 12 months. And we'll get into a lot of our demand response, so we have there's an objective to keep that as low as possible because we can realize those savings all year. But we are required to meet that capacity obligation. So within this contract, we can lock in a portion of the capacity from that, and that is being locked at $5.38 per kW month, which right now is below what the ICAP, which is the capacity auction, capacity auction price, what that payment is. So it's actually below market now. The next few years, it's at the bottom paragraph, are coming. As mentioned, it's been upwards of $15 a kW. I think the last, we just got the auction closeout for 23 yesterday, is going to actually go down to like $2. But if you look at the historical average, it's still trending to be below what we pay if we had to go to the market to procure that capacity. So again, it's it's a very lucrative contract for the utility. And then lastly, this is just, and I'll get you the pipe. I know everybody's going to say, where's the pie chart? So for our power supply portfolio, when the Palmer goes online, Q1 or Q2 of 2023, this will represent about 12% of our wholesale energy portion of our power supply portfolio.
Palmer's going to be 12%.
Palmer's 12%.
Wow. That's significant.
So, yeah.
Which, just to sort of, because this is, to me, I still don't completely understand it, but when you do that tour, what you're going to find is that we have one big substation down behind the Southbrook Park. And we have big wires that come into that one substation. And all the power that basically comes into Danvers comes in through that one line, big line. Somehow, and I don't know how exactly, but somehow, magically, we're able to make a determination of how that pie relates to what it comes in. And honestly, I consider myself relatively intelligent, and I can't quite figure out how they do it, but I know they do. And then ultimately, once it gets into that substation, the town's power grid works almost the same as your home fuse box works, and it goes out to the different parts. But what we're talking about here is the varying components of how we determine where we're getting that one line's worth of power and how we're paying for it.
Yeah, well put.
So, yeah.
So as you try to understand that, two things sometimes help, Mike, is that all the power plants, it all gets combined together.
Yeah.
So we don't care where the power's coming from. It could be coming, theoretically, those electrons could be coming from a different power plant. However, we have to pay to get them from A to B.
Right.
Okay, let me try it. Here's where I'm gonna.
I knew it. Yeah.
You knew this was coming, right?
Twinkle in your eye.
Numbers straight.
It's a cute little cartoon. It's actually very nice.
Yes, Mark.
Bill, if I may, just to go back to the Palmer plant that we're talking about, because that sounds like a fantastic deal. But what I'm more interested in is what are we on the hook for to develop that plant? Because that plant has not been built yet. And what do we have at risk if we signed up for this? Because we're going to be responsible for a portion of the construction of the plant itself. Yes, we'll get distribution of power later on, but how long are we going to be on the hook for? Because this is similar to what happened with Seabrook and all those kinds of facilities. And I know I've gone through some of those myself.
Okay, thank you for the question. All right. So, do you want to answer that, Clint?
Sure, Bill. So Mark, this one is actually different than the Seabrook or the long-term nuclear contracts. So Danvers isn't an owner of the plant. We are signing a long-term purchase power agreement with the owner of the plant. So
We're on the hook to buy the power.
Right. So we're in a consortium with other municipal light plants. We got our percentage stake of it. But yeah, so Danvers is not an owner. We are going to a long-term power purchase agreement with the owner, and so really there's we're not liable for if something happens during the construction of the plant or the failure to construct the plant.
unlike Seabrook where we had to,
Our percentage.
You buy.
we bought bonds
Right.
to, you know.
Seabrook,
our-
Millstone, we were
Physically
owners of
owned.
those
Yeah.
plants.
Then who is financing this?
It's a conglomerate that got together to do it. So we don't
Just-
have
I'm
any
just
paper.
wondering what kind of a hook is there, because those plants don't come up just by investment money. It's got to be by the purchasers of the power, and that's the only concern I have.
So they've financed it based on contracting for the power, where the financing came
Mhm.
from, just like we've done it with many other plants.
Yeah, so you catch that. They're a business, and they have said, we're gonna build a plant and we're gonna sell electricity. We're selling long-term commitments and see all these customers we've lined up. Based on that, will you loan us money to build the plant and we'll pay you back interest once we get going?
That's it.
So we are obligated to buy power once they're up and running. If they're not ever up and running, we have no obligation. Is that correct?
Yep, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we've
Oh,
looked at
actually,
it.
And our
if they fail to produce power for us, there's actually penalty clauses that
Yeah.
kick in.
There's a-
If we suffer damages, if we have to pay extra to replace that, they're on the hook for that difference.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the expectation is 2022, right, is
Yeah, quarter 123 now, yeah.
some, now we've come back a little bit, but.
Which
yeah.
fits our portfolio, because we actually don't need the power today.
Right.
We will need it in 2022, right when the plant comes online.
I'd just say, if you want to really have your eyes gloss over, they gave me a copy of the agreement, and that.
Stick to the cliff notes on that
Yeah,
one?
that was, it's,
I'm sorry. Eric, you had a couple questions?
Sure, so 2 questions on this. Some of it has been explained. If the completion of the plan is delayed, is there a revision to the agreement that needs to happen automatically? So that's great. Claire, if you could summarize, understanding the numbers, at the end of the day, what's the value add for buying power from them?
Sure. Just
Cheaper?
very high level, so
Plain.
like I mentioned, it's cheap, yeah, okay, there you go, perfect.
Okay.
So typically, if we went to market to secure this amount of energy, this block of energy, right now, it would more than likely be natural gas supplied. And that wouldn't, we wouldn't have the RECs to sell back, and then also once we are on the hook for the greenhouse energy standards, the CES, clean energy standards, we would have to actually buy RECs to fill that. So that meets that portion, which is helpful. And then again, the energy pricing is coming in below the locational marginal price, the wholesale price. So as a long-term, as a hedge, it comes from a very good position.
So then, really my thought is that the high-level summary of this, even if in the last paragraph, this makes sense because it's cleaner purchasing.
Mhm.
It's we anticipate or project it to be cheaper over the term. Just
Yep.
for the layman to say, why are you doing that? I'd like to have the talking points.
So the
What is
other
the business
important
case?
talking point to add to that is this is very competitive electricity to buy. It's a long-term contract. It also increases our clean energy portion of our portfolio.
That's helpful.
Which we're negotiating right now with the state. We'll be advising the board about. We're going to have thresholds we need to hit. So we are actively looking for cost-effective ways to buy renewable energy, so we don't get hit for it. In 2022, or actually in 2020, in 2021, there are cheaper alternatives for short-term contracts. Natural gas right now is probably the cheapest you can buy right now, but it doesn't help you towards the renewable, and it's not a long-term deal. Probably in 6 months from now, we'll be talking to you guys about a short-term deal to plug one piece of our portfolio. We know we just want to do probably 5 years and so much. We'll probably recommend natural gas for that. It'll just be the cheapest power. It comes in, that's why we're doing that. But this is the piece to help that clean energy piece.
That's helpful. So the talking points summary would be helpful.
Sure.
As
We'll
well.
talk about that. Yeah, I see just what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing it because of this.
Right.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and
3 bullets.
I would like to request that you add into that, what's the business case financially? In other words, if we were to go to the market,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to buy at these prices for 20 years. What would be the comparable market prices we would be paying? So that we see not only the talking points about renewable energy, clean energy, but also what's the financial business case. And, you know, I think all of us, whoops, sorry, I think all of us know that sometimes you're going to pay more for those. But we would want to limit that, obviously, and we would want to see a business case for a lot of these where it's actually financially advantageous. And we know that's the way the market is swinging between solar and wind and all that. They're actually coming in cheaper than the oil and nuclear, et cetera.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, great question, but please add to the business case.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Are we now ready for the engineering report?
Sure. Without Mark here, where the projects that the crews are working on is still the reconductoring of Water Street is the biggest one that they're working on out there. But we postponed going in any more deeper dive into that until next month when we have Mark here.
Okay, but just give them a brief overview of what that is.
Oh, so on a street like Water Street, we had on the 5,000 volt cables, we had older cables, older uninsulated cables that are up at the top of the poles that are nearing their capacity and how much they can carry. We're systematically going through various areas of town, replacing those bare wires, we called it, with what's called spacer cable. Those are the ones in the triangle. You see the wires like that. So we're doing up Water Street, which will increase the durability of the wire and increase the capacity of our 5 kV. Last year we did Center Street. Because we went up Center Street right by the first church there as it goes by Hobart Street, that area. And so it's a much stronger cable and can do more. The other piece that we're reconducting was the underground through Liberty Tree Mall. Liberty Tree Mall is all underground 5,000 volt, and that was back circa the development of the mall in the 70s. We're working on that.
And that gets at a couple of our high-level metrics, reliability and capacity to handle the load in the town and not have outages. So we're improving our reliability and our capacity. Okay.
But we can transition from engineering right into to my report as we did another revision to the dashboard, and the purpose of this is to give a tool so that we can apprise the board of how a high-level review of our major projects that are going on and the projects that we are working with the board on. As we went to redesign this, we tried to think of what is the high-level things that we want to work on the board with and advise the board. And so each project, we want to tell you the project that we're working on, what the project budget is, what the next action items are coming on each, and then have a calendar on how we're doing it, and then we'll also track how we've spent the money on each task. And this is the kind of high-level review that we thought would be appropriate to the board and give you guys the information so you can see how we're doing. This format fits how we track projects, and everyone may have a different format of it, but this is the one that works for us and how we track our stuff in-house. So we've taken a stab at putting on here the big projects that we want to keep tabs on with the board. And this is our first draft, there's a few more changes to go. But Station 42, right now we are working to execute a contract for that design. It's a a large contract, so there's these gentlemen called attorneys involved. So that's
real ones, not fake ones.
There's some real ones that are working out the contract language on that. So we're hopeful to get started on the work until April. We just can't start the work till we get Did
you catch he put gentlemen and attorneys in the same sentence?
Most of the ones who are probably gentle ladies who are doing these.
The one thing on these design tasks here, I think you're going to see this more stepped across. Clint had them all starting in April with the execution of the contract. We're probably going to be doing some civil work, then get into the structure, and then the design. We're probably going to see a staggering of these as your next month. As Clint and I just need to work that through, and obviously we don't have a contract in front of us yet, so that'll lay that out.
Okay. Just a question, the 626 number, and then you've got numbers down below. Those are subsets of the 626?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. They should add up to 626. I didn't check that.
As long as Excel still got the sum function.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Check those folders. The cost of service study. This is what Clint, we may want to add in the name of the company that are doing these things on the next one. I know this is UFS, but so that's a $24,000 study, which we're getting close to having all the data submitted to them, all of our stuff, and filled all our reports and answered all the questions. We believe that's getting close, and really looking to get that report finalized for June, right, Clint?
Yeah, yep.
The landfill solar project. So just 2 seconds. This is the town has a closed out municipal waste landfill, which is up off of Route 1 South on a road called East Coast Road. We're looking to perhaps put a solar array on the top of that would generate power for us. Before we do that, we're going to have to add in material and create a level area. They didn't leave us with a level area on the landfill. They left us with a rolling hills. So the first thing is to get a permit to actually level off the surface and have the permit allow for to put solar panels on top of the municipal solid waste. So that contract is also we're actually not even negotiating a contract yet. We're still in the RFP phase where we're selecting between companies. Clint, Jeff Ellie, and our town engineer, Stephen King, and his staff are working together on this. So it's a joint civil and electric engineering project. And we have one of our new civil engineers, her name is Martha Duffield, just started with us, and she's going to be heading this up on bringing the team together on the civil engineering side. Yep. So right now we're thinking it's going to cost about $80,000 to do the permitting. That's from the materials we've been submitted to date. We don't even have a contractor selected, but we expect that contractor to get selected here shortly. We flip this over. The biggest thing, we're working with the board on the financial policies, and actually the one that we're closest to being completed is actually Clint wrote complete on the PP&FA policy, which is the last one. What's that? The fifth one down. And then the rest of these are the policies that were identified in the efficiency study that we'd really like to get them all done with the board by the end of June. So we'll also, at our next iteration of this, Clint and I'll have which month we believe each policy will be coming to you guys. That'll be our goal for next month, to have these, which month we're going to deliver each one for a draft, at least a draft.
Yeah, and a lot of these are tied to the cost of service study also, so they're going to be helping us with that.
Right, it's going at the same time. The efficiency programs, these are all of the programs that we're working on to either enhance our market position or sell more electricity or be more, well, so we're trying to sell more electricity at the same time we're getting people to conserve. So we need to serve two masters there. So we have energy efficiency programs where we're giving people light bulbs and we're helping them with the thermostats and that kind of thing. At the same time, we're also trying to do business development and sell more electricity. We want people to buy electric cars and more to come on that. We want to have electric charging stations around town because that sells electricity. So we have to do both things. These are the electric charging stations, which are in. Do we have a report on how much we sold last month, Clint, on that?
We're going to pull, just pulling it right now, so we can have something for next month.
So we'll have it, or maybe an email out about,
sure.
Because we have electric charging stations. We just wanted to, at the board, how much are they getting used? How much are we using through those charging stations?
Well, as a side note, the solar and electric are things I'm very much interested in, but I won't
cool.
you with questions now.
Oh, good. We're getting into a lot more talk about that. Yeah, I know we're getting late today, but that's. And then we're even looking at the electric vehicle time of use rates, which is that next one. So if you charge your car at the right time, your rate will be different. We'll encourage you to do that. The demand response, that's our temporary generator that we've put in for the last few years in a substation. We put in a 4 megawatt generator, and we just run it to drop our peak, our annual peak and our monthly peaks, to avoid those high capacity costs. We're out to bid for our temporary generator right now. With the latest capacity auction, we're concerned we're getting near a break even on that. As it used to make us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, now depending on what bids we have, we're going to have to look at that analysis more closely. We would actually pay, you know, whatever it was, it would be $250,000 to rent the generator or fuel it, and we'd make $300,000 profit off it. So those days may have changed. So that will be coming up. Regardless of the temp generator, we'll keep our demand response program. Clint's working with staff and really designing now a more active demand response where we call on our customers to drop their own use during the peaks, and we'll compensate you somehow. Really working at that commercial and the middle commercial section, which we think there's some opportunities to get demand response there.
Certainly.
The hardest part about the peaks is when 4 years ago when we were peak shaving, the peaks were real peaks and it was pretty easy to knock them off. Now that everybody's doing it, they're flattening out. And so that means we have to do it long. It's getting harder to predict when the peak is going to be. We had one peak in June 2 years ago, and we never had that before. We've never had a peak in June before. The last one is the financial software, where this is the software which is going to look at our financial management package, our inventory, our work order processing, how we're billing out people for work we do, all of that. Right now we're going through the vendor evaluation. I think you guys you're narrowing down to a good vendor so we can get that going, and then we'll procure the software and get things going. And then once we do that, then there'll be a whole bunch of bullets underneath this item.
Yes. Be a whole other page.
Does this give the board the information they're looking for?
It's fine by me. This is, you're more familiar with this
Yeah.
and use it to a greater extent than I do.
Just as a background, I did a lot of project management stuff in my career, and it was a project business, General Electric company. So, and there is something called Project Management Institute, which is a professional society of project management. They have a real body of knowledge. You're probably familiar with those kind of disciplines from your career. This is fine for looking at projects. And I use the term dashboard, kind of like an automobile dashboard. We used to do that where I worked. And one of the things I printed off, and I keep mentioning, is the mission statement. Danvers Electric is committed to providing high quality, reliable, and affordable electricity and other related services to its citizens.
So the next thing go right into, and Bill had the transition for us, is the reliability indices. And this is something that we used to do each year. We would report to the board on it and report to the Board of Selectmen on. And we're very happy to bring it back, something we want to bring back. And we needed staff to be able to do it. And now we have the staff to be able to do it. So Clint's going to have a handout that he's going to give everyone to review. And these are the industry standards on how utilities count up, measure up, average what do they have for outages. And there's the three acronyms, which is the SAIDI, SAFE, and CAIDI. And we've written out those under the bold with the line under it of the SAFE, which is the total number of sustained interruptions divided by the number of consumers. So that's the number of outages, not how long they were, but how many blips did you get? How many times did the light on your microwave flash out?
Yeah.
And even you as the average customer, how many do that? The second one is that's the safety. The second one is the SAIDI, which is the duration of those.
Good morning.
So what was if you got interrupted, how long was that outage?
Excellent.
All right, and then they take those two numbers, or that, and so then you get the duration divided by the number of interruptions. So then you get more of a ratio to to blend those two things out. Then on page 2, we take, and this is how we did last year in 2019. And we're able to compare ourselves to the other municipal utilities and to the investor-owned utilities. So I gotta say, you note in 2019, it's without MED. So when we have a large weather event that affects only a few utilities, such as our bomb cyclone that hit Danvers. It hit Danvers and Marblehead. It didn't hit Middleton. It didn't hit anybody else. And we take the outages from that out of the report and put them off to the side because we wouldn't be able to compare ourselves. We're not saying we don't want to take that seriously. We do. We want, and we have those records. But with that out, this is where we rank among the other utilities to see how we're doing.
Okay. So pretty much right in the middle.
So I just took something very complicated. I don't know. I tried to explain it in a simple manner, but
yeah, no, you did a good job with it, I thought.
so you can know there's a lot of math behind that. You know how many, we kept track of every single outage and every customer and how long it was, and
Incidence, duration, and the ratio.
you got it. Yep.
Yeah. Wow, very good.
It is good.
Yeah,
A
and
little room for improvement there, so, you know.
Oh yeah, right, absolutely. I don't know what the heck, I'm going down to Mansfield. I don't think they have any trees. So I think there's no trees in Braintree and Mansfield. So we cut all the trees there.
Yeah, but you know, it's funny, you say that, but if you look at the bottom one, which to me is the most important one,
Right.
that's the average, Mansfield is awful.
Yeah.
I mean, so when Mansfield does have a problem, they're completely incapable of handling it.
Fixing
is what
it.
comes down to.
On that rare
I
problem.
mean, and then because N-Star clearly just is terrible. That's what we always have to push. Do you really want N-Star?
yeah, wow.
This is good.
No, this is very good.
So thank you to Clint and the staff for putting this number cruncher behind.
Absolutely.
And making it in a format that we can, it's very useful.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we then have board members' closing comments, questions, correspondence, etc. So Mike, we'll start with you.
No, just we want to welcome Eric and look forward to working with him and on and forward.
Okay. Eric, any questions, comments so far?
So my comments were, it's very well presented. The information is very helpful. I will get caught up on the acronyms. The only question that I had for a later date, since you referenced our mission and given some of the comments that Mark has said, how we measure customer service and customer satisfaction would be important so that one resident doesn't have to say he's representing. We have a measure that also, gives us information. So I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm having a good time. Thank you.
All right. Well, again, I'd like to add my welcome to the board. I think town manager's made an excellent choice from what I can see so far. So glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
I got a few questions. We had asked at the last meeting if we could be supplied a copy of the Steve Bartham memo on the pilot change. And I think we've seen that.
We've asked for that.
And I know it was somewhat informal. It was mentioned last month. It was somewhat informal. It might want to be polished up, but still like to get that because that's a significant increase to our annual costs.
Yep.
We've had a fixed pilot payment for what, 10 years or so.
Yeah, more than that.
No,
yeah.
more than that.
And the town manager has recently decided that we're going to go through a 4-year step up, significant step up of what we pay the town in lieu of taxes. So we wanted to get a copy of that memo for the board.
Sure, we'll keep on that for that.
And that is not something that we have any control over, but we are an advisory board. We are asked to review the finances, make recommendations. So we felt that as in our role as a board, we ought to at least be able to see what the town manager is thinking was on that. Dashboards we've already talked about. I mentioned goals last year, or last month. Just, are there any kind of goals for the year that the management team has in place for the organization? Certainly projects fit that, you know, this may satisfy that.
On the backside, I think the financial policies and the financial software, those are more goal-orientated than project-orientated.
Mm-hmm.
The financial software is going to lead to our inventory control system. So those, I think those are following up on the goals we identified in that efficiency study.
Okay.
Does that sound right, guys? Is that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, it's just kind of a generic question that to ask you to think about. You know, are there goals that you've got the organization striving for?
Sure.
And that's why I brought up the mission statement again. Is there any goals that you have tied to quality? Whatever quality means in the context of this business. You've certainly provided us with an excellent example of what we're doing on reliability, how we're doing on reliability.
Sure.
And then the projects address, what are we doing about capacity, controlling costs, building in redundancy, which goes back to reliability. So, a lot of that stuff is really covered by that. It's just asking the question again, almost as a rhetorical question, is there anything else we should be looking at?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had written down the PPFA policy draft, but we got that. And then, just as a question, do we have a defined new board member onboarding process written down anywhere, or checklist, or anything like that? So that, if we had a checklist of, here's all the materials we ought to give Eric so he can get up to speed. I know when I came on board 2 years ago, I want a stack of stuff like that as a result of just getting exposed to something in a meeting and then say, hey, can you give me that? And I'm sure Steph remembers, you gave me a lot of stuff. Open meeting law is one you need to be aware of. The Chapter 164 of the state laws, which governs so-called enterprise funds, of which we are. We're a separate standalone business enterprise fund for the town. So we have to keep separate ratepayers stuff from taxpayer stuff. So, there are state laws about that. I think you sent me something on the DPU at some point. I don't even remember anymore. It's been a while since I went through all that stuff. But it just, in my short time on the board, we've got 3 new members. Is there any kind of, or should there be, maybe a checklist of?
Two-pronged answer. On the town overreaching, town umbrella side, they've talked about annual training, this process for new board members coming on.
Okay.
I've seen a couple of those, but I'm not aware of what they've settled on for what that's going to be.
Okay.
We'll research that.
Okay.
On the second side of the prong is the stuff that we provide, that myself, Pete, Clint, Steph, Mark all put together for you guys.
Yeah.
That's something Clint and I can sit with Stephanie and come up with a little box list of the stuff that we hand out to have that would help us every time. We'll sit down and brainstorm on that.
Yeah.
That'd be worth doing that exercise.
Yeah.
We'd have a little checkoff sheet for us.
Yeah,
and knowing that we're gonna have to, every time we get a new policy or something, we have to change it. But maybe we can make it generic enough that if we put policies or just thinking so that we don't have to change it every 6 months or every year.
Right.
But we'll take a stab at making that. That's a good thing.
At that because
it'll help us. We kind of do it anyways. Whenever we're putting material together, we'll be doing that. So we'll meet with Steph and put that together.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing because it happens often enough, clearly, that it would be useful.
Sure.
And I know.
I hope it's not going to be that often.
This is the board for the next 10 years. So.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Remember what you said about the age of the population here. I'm going to be 75 very shortly, so I'm not a long-termer.
Eric and I are still young.
At least I hope I am.
I get Eric on a 5 and 2. 5 and 2 year old. That's all I can get out of him, Mike. But
so, anyway, it's a thought. I know it was helpful to me. I met with Mark 2 or 3 times. I met with Chuck 3 or 4 times, and Chuck gave me some handouts. You know, that's how I learned the Genco, Trango, Disco lingo. Was he had a little booklet on it, you know, that he loaned me, and some other stuff. Peter, would we have 3 or 4 meetings?
The fact that Chuck simplified that for you and said it just totally floors me. Right
Really?
there. Yes.
Wow, he was very helpful to me.
That's
when I was getting
good.
started.
I'm just very pleased that Chuck simplified it.
Yeah, he had, you know, 3 or 4 different little booklets. You know, that Transco Genco thing was probably not 10 pages, but it was really a nice overview that helped me understand.
Chuck had a way of sometimes making flip a coin complicated.
Sure. Yes, he could do that.
And I'm very glad that he was able to boil that down.
Yeah, well, as you know, I ask a lot of questions when I don't understand stuff.
We cut away all that other.
So I asked him a lot of questions, so I think it was a matter of survival for him.
Cool.
Okay, we need to set the date for the next meeting.
Oh.
Okay.
So, and well, lastly, Mr. Chairman, on Saturday, March 14th, that's the day that we'll be presenting, actually the entire town and water, sewer, electric budgets get presented to the selectmen. They do a one-day workshop on Saturday the 14th.
Yeah.
Your presence isn't mandatory, but you're very welcome to stop by. What I just heard yesterday, they want very brief presentations on the budget.
Will you do me one favor with that? Just can you check with somebody in the town manager's office what my responsibilities are in terms of finance committee in this?
Sure.
My guess is that I can't vote as a finance committee member on our municipal light budget, but that's not necessarily the case. So.
Well, remember, we are an advisory board.
That's
We don't even really take a vote, we just advise you, give you guys the budget to review.
Just check.
But I'll check.
Just check so we don't run afoul of it. But I agree with you on that. And
Mark, you have a comment?
I have a comment and a question. Speaking of the budget, is the budget that we received last month the one that was submitted? I mean, I don't know if I have the latest one or not.
So that was what we submitted. Whether or not it's been changed since then, I don't know. There'll be a new one coming out. We don't have it out yet.
So we, as the electric company, don't know what's going to be in the budget right now.
There's another version of it that's going to be coming out.
Okay, so one thing that I noticed on this draft that I have is that the $4.3 million retirement payment, I can't find it on here as a 2019 expense. So I'm just wondering, where did that go?
Well, that wouldn't be an expense, Mr. Zuberek. That would be a reduction of our liability. So that would be a balance sheet transaction where we reduced the asset cash and reduced our liability, the liability to the division. So it's not an expense. The expense for all of the pension costs went on when the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Boards, required that we bring on all of the expense and the liability. So on our books now, that shows as a liability. And again, when we paid the last payment last October, reduction of cash, reduction of liability.
So
So you see our cash account go down, Pete?
Yeah.
Which cash account went down?
It came out of the stabilization fund.
So when you see the stabilization,
I've seen
that's where it went down. The money
You're
went to
not
the
gonna-
liability.
You will not see it as a reduction, as an increase to expenses, Mark, because the expenses were incurred and put on the books of the division when we were required to bring the whole expense and the whole liability onto the books. So that was, again, a balance sheet transaction that we made, not one that would affect the expense of the division.
Profit and loss.
Correct.
It's not a profit and loss
That's
expense
correct.
statement.
It's
So
not
it's
an,
been
it's not an,
borrowed from another account.
it's not an income statement transaction, it's a balance sheet transaction.
So as a result of that, weren't we supposed to have a reduction in the retirement expenses?
So yes, so we're getting, however,
Yeah, it's not shown on here.
no. So when on this year, there was a reduction in our annual because of us paying it off. However, in studying it, was also found that the retirees, am I right? Is this right, Pete?
Yeah, go ahead.
The retirees, the retirement contribution for the retirees was not being made by the electric division. It was being paid by the town for health insurance. So that made it go back up because they added the retirees in, which should have been there all along.
And not to make this an accounting session, but as I mentioned, we took the unfunded actuarially accrued liability from the funding schedule, and that's what we paid. The actuarial funding schedule uses a different set of parameters than GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Boards, which governs GAAP, which is the way we have to present our general accepted accounting principles, which is the way we have to present our statements. So even though we've got rid of, at the time, the full funding liability, that doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily get rid of the accrued liability on the books, because GASB, which regulates us, when things go up and down like that, they make us amortize the gain and the loss over 4 years. So from the funding schedule perspective, we should have we don't have to send as much money down, but on the books of the division, you're still probably going to see a liability for 4 years, and hopefully if the assets keep going up in value, then that should go away too.
Because I'm going back to the meetings that we've had in regard to the transfer, and that it was going to produce a reduction in the retirement budget amount that we were going to include, and that doesn't seem to be there.
It will reduce the cash payment to the retirement board. Part of the cash payment that we have been sending on an annual basis represents the incurred costs on an annual basis. Another part of it was paying for the accrued liability. So even though we sent, say, 1.1 million to the retirement board, say 5.5 of it went to the annual expenses, the other 5.5 of it would have gone to reduce the accrued liability on the books of Danvers Electric.
Well, not doing that.
All right, so let me just ask, which might confuse or clarify. On our monthly expenses, we show employee pension and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
When we had the discussion, we said that those were going to be going down. Now, we said they'd be going down this year. We're not yet looking at any of this year's expenses. These finances we look at today are through 2019. So
Correct.
we would not expect to see a change in those expenses. Is that correct?
Correct.
But next month we'll see it.
Going forward,
What would be?
what account would we be talking? There's, just so we hopefully are all clear on this. Where's the finance?
You want to think about it, Peter? Or
926.
926, employee pension and benefits.
Right.
Last year, we spent almost 2 million, 1,955.
Correct. Remembering that there is more in there than just the pension costs. There's
Yeah.
health insurance costs,
Right.
dental costs.
Okay. We would expect to spend less on that this year.
No, the whole roll-up of 926, health insurance is going to drive it up. It's
Okay.
going to be less than it would have been without making the contribution.
Okay. This goes back to that $4 million we paid too.
And the previous $5 million that we
Yeah,
paid.
and the
So
previous
it's
$5
$9 million
Right.
that was put in.
The question seems to be, where is the reduction going to show up, and is it there?
Right,
But
And
absolutely.
the answer seems to be, it will be there, but not in the exact amount, because there's more in it than what we're talking about originally.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's important to remember, this is an unfunded liability in the first place, so it's.
Yes, and if we look at
Yeah.
page 5 of our financial statements and we look at accumulated provision for pension benefits, liability in account 228, you'll see that, you know, between the two, that's OPEB, the other post-employment benefits, or health insurance, and the pension liability, that's what we've got on the books.
Yeah, it was 16 million last year, and it's 13.3 now, as of the end of
Correct.
2019.
And that's, you see.
That's where we see an effect of that 4 million we paid, even though we see a 3 million difference.
Yeah, and at this point, yes. So the funding schedule that we are going to receive after the retirement board reports to PERAC for 2019, the auditors audit the books for 2019, then the actuaries will in fact do their work. We will get the actuarial report for the pension system with the funding schedule for the town in total and the breakout for parts and pieces, which will be the electric division. And it is our hope that we will not have to fund anything more other than what we've promised in this particular year.
Okay. So, this may be, as you look back for 4 or 5 years, watch what happens today.
Yeah.
It goes,
So that's
when they do the studies every year or two, you can get dramatic changes in our liability. And that's what I noticed when he took me through those past years. So you ask a good question, Mark. It is a confusing issue. I thank you for...
Well, I have one other comment.
Okay, but it's getting late.
We gotta
Let's
wrap
make
it.
it quick.
Oh, hey.
We need to wrap up.
We get all day.
No, we don't.
All day, actually. I mean,
I'm retired and I don't have all day. So
The
let's go.
question that I have, the final question is that we have now in the budget increased the pilot payment to over $900,000. Now, I remember, and Mike, you probably remember, is that the pilot policy was established by the Board of Selectmen at the time back in 96, 97.
yeah.
And that was a policy set by the Board of Selectmen. Has this been run through the Board of Selectmen? And are they going to set the policy and not the town manager?
It's
That's
up to
the
the board.
question.
It's not up to us, it's up to
I
you.
know that.
You're
I know
asking the
that, but I
question
just-
at the wrong board.
Yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
no, it's the right question. It's got to get back to the town hall. That's the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Move to adjourn.
So moved.
I'm sorry, I seconded.
That's
All in
double.
favor?
We get to be second all the time.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is...